This video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon team. If you want to join a Patreon team, please feel free to click the link down below. And if not, that's totally fine. I do hope you enjoy the video.
Little escapade of mine involving a couple of planets, which shall be nameless, is responsible. Doesn't really matter. Don't think I disapprove of thrillers. I don't. A story doesn't have to appeal to the heart. It can also appeal to the spine. Sometimes you want your heart to be warmed, and sometimes you want your spine to tingle. The tingling, it's to be hoped, will be quite audible as you listen tonight.
What speaks to your spine? The daring tales of adventurers finding treasure, uncovering long-lost monsters, and facing the world's evil? Possibly it's out of our own world, the journey of heroes of space, interacting with creatures from our own deepest and darkest imaginations. Or of course, you can't forget the Caped Crusader, saving our cities and all of Earth's beautiful creatures. Or maybe it's a man loading a gun, preparing to
Murder his whole family. Horror will speak to the spine, but it lives under the skin. This week I wanted to take some time out and talk about the horror games that really affect me and the games that get under my skin and what could be the possible connection behind it. I took some time out and made a little list of games that really affect me in very different but also unpleasant ways. Of course, we'll start with the most basic of what horror is, and that's just going with the deep scares. It's the way that some horror games can just seep their way into our heads and just live under there until they're ready to really play on our fears. Horror is a broad term, of course, so in this video we'll see not just horror games but other games that affect people emotionally. And because of its broad term, it really allows horror to be one of the most diverse genres out there, allowing it to affect people independently on totally different levels. Some people may be scared of one thing while other people are not bothered by it at all. And that allows us to really be thrown into our worst nightmares at any given time because we never really know what speaks to people and what doesn't. For me, it'd be games like the first 3 Silent Hill games or Eternal Darkness as I was younger, being warned by how scary these games really could be. The idea of me being a kid and turning on these games and actually sitting through it would possibly be such a brave memory, and for me, even coming back to them as an adult age, I remember that legacy and legend that I built around them with my imagination. So seeing Silent Hill over again, or those funny but outdated sanity effects of Eternal Darkness, it really allows them to sort of live inside my brain and just stay there forever as a capsule of horror and a capsule of fear of me growing up. When a game is sold to a player as a horror game, the developers are creating these experiences to make them feel fear. So when a game's atmosphere wants you to feel uncomfortable, the developer intentionally makes that feeling go forward. And then they will create intentional situations that will put the player on unease. We go into these genres expecting the stories to speak to the spine with a really sharp tongue. Many horror games will feature such unpleasant themes such as suicide, rape, murder, abuse, alcoholism, you name it. All terrible but unfortunately relatable themes that can act as an easy way to worm its way into our own minds. There are so many great games out there that send shivers straight through my body. From Alma's creepy hallucinations from the first Fear game, or being chased by the many psychotic characters of Haunting Grounds, or even every deceptive turn that you take in Lost in Vivo, only reminding you that you can never be ready for what's truly coming next. Or of course, you can't forget games like Bioshock, where its best moments for me were when you're wandering around the decaying wonders of Rapture and always wondering what abomination you're going to walk into next. And most recently, a game that really spoke to me just on a basic horror level is Visage. Visage has some genuine moments that just left me in pure terror. Not horror, but terror. From its tone-setting beginning with its murder scene to its empty halls that somehow are full of presence, a presence that you don't like but it's there either way. Each time I find myself coming back to this game, there is only a limited amount of play I can really endure before needing to take a break and put it down because of its intense and oppressive atmosphere. Every puzzle and every room I uncover, it just makes me feel that little bit more alone. Feeling alone is the least of your worries in one of my favourite horror games in recent years, Dark Woods. This world never feels safe. From start to finish, you never really get a full grasp of what you're going up against, or what you're even surviving for in the first place. But all that you know is that you must continue to push on no matter what happens. The oppressive atmosphere allows for Dark Woods to never pull its punches, in its tone and even every time that you speak to a friendly face. Even when you're watching these people who you may want to connect with, you are still forced to look at something beyond our worst nightmares. The incredible designs of the inhabitants that roam this world constantly leave you searching for new little details in each and every illustration. And for its runtime, you never even get a real true sense of who you really are. The main protagonist's name is the Stranger to us. Even us as the player who control him at every moment, we never truly get a good look at him and makes us question if we can even trust or even feel comfortable around a character you really never get to know. And it is that feeling of being uncomfortable. You're put in such uncomfortable situations with your back against the wall. Literally. If you feel like this world is hostile during the day, then you just wait until that sun falls and the night begins. Each night feels like a mental task of its own. You're forced to fuel a generator that can last throughout the night and pray that the sun comes for you before the world does. The sound design on Dark Woods is some of the best I've heard. As you walk through ruins of burned buildings or even overgrown forests, you'll hear distant howls of dogs or even the haunting footsteps of creatures that roam in these woods. There is definitely this unique, untrusting paranoia that consumes the player with every step and swing that you make, and I love it. It's a horror experience that is unlike any other. It's one that will always affect me no matter how long I've played the game, or every dangerous day that I prepare for as I leave my home. This game forces me to be responsible and take responsibility for the outcomes of my choices to survive, and that responsibility is overwhelmingly haunting. Growing up in a household with one older sister and 5 younger brothers, there was a responsibility of being the oldest boy out of the lot. I was meant to be tough, I needed to defend them, of course I needed to be a responsible babysitter when I needed to be. I remember when I was 17 years old and I was babysitting my brother and he had been out with his friends and playing with the park and having a good time, or so I thought. I got a knock on the door one time and I see his friends screaming and crying, and then my brother came running up the driveway with his head cracked open and covered in blood. He had tripped over somehow and cracked it open on the side of a wall. And all this is happening while my mum and stepdad quickly popped out to my nan's house. I panicked. I even panicked to the stage I punched the wall because I was freaking out. And let me tell you something, the neighbours next door were luckily having a party, but when they got the banging on the door of me panicking and then see me holding my brother covered in blood, well, that's an unexpected way to make an entrance. My brother actually lost a lot of blood that night, and I can actually see the skull through the gashed wound on his head. It was a night that scared me so much that I had a few nightmares about that situation going wrong. And I felt like it was all my responsibility to make sure that it went completely to plan, otherwise, well, the worst could have happened. I played A Plague Tale on launch, and I was in love with the setting, the tone of the world, and most importantly, the brother and sister relationship between Hugo and his sister Amicia. After being forced from their home and losing their family in a raid, they're thrown into a world which is overrun with rats and war. The game isn't a horror game necessarily, but it doesn't stop that from getting under my skin. The theming of siblings, responsibility, and of course being forced to grow up in a world after surviving traumatic experiences is a subject that I seem to know all too well and fondly relates to me as I grew up in a very similar fashion. We're able to see Amicia grow, and we see her first kill when defending her brother, or that frustration that grows towards her brother. But with all this, we're also put into her shoes and able to relate with her and the responsibility that has been thrown upon her shoulders, and we're able to view the life that she once loved be taken from her immediately. There is a fantastic sequence where she is dreaming of her brother running away. She's then confronted with a tunnel filled with screaming bodies that seem to be glued and stuck to the walls, dragging and clawing at her feet. Their souls are all screaming, and these are the hands of every single person that she has ruthlessly killed in her moments of retaliation to protect her own brother's life. They scream at her and you can hear them suffering, and they want to drag her to hell with them. But no matter what, she continues pushing through, and she screams back at them.
I did it for him, and I'll kill you again if I have to. I'll kill all of you!
And during this whole entire nightmare sequence, she's never ever able to gain on her brother, as the corpses and even the rats drag her lower and lower to the ground. She is overburdened by that responsibility of looking after her brother, knowing that if he ever went missing, it would all be her fault. That responsibility is jarring and sometimes overwhelming on younger people's heads, especially like mine, who are forced to look after kids in traumatic moments where they feel like there should be an adult that is around to at least lend a hand or solve all their problems. And it's hearing siblings in frustration or having siblings be upset that really affect me. I hate hearing that my brothers are crying, or if I had times where they would generally be super hurt, and hearing them in pain and knowing that they're crying their eyes out, it would feel like there was nothing I could do and it's all my fault. And it's that sound of crying that I just can't stand. Just like PT, I hate that baby. It gives me chills, the cry, the uncontrollable cry, knowing that I can't stop it, I can't help it, I can't solve its pain. Hearing a child or a younger sibling in pain genuinely kicks in my parental instincts, and no matter what I do, I just can't find a way to stop this thing from crying. And the longer I hear this baby crying and screaming in agony, it only encourages those doubtful voices that judge my ability as a responsible adult, and making the depressive voices in my head send me into a spiral. I, like many fantastic YouTubers, have discussed and given endless praise to everything Hellblade brings to the table. From Melina Juergen's performance as Senua, telling you a raw and emotional story about a woman dealing with the effects of psychosis, and the intense vision of Helheim, brilliantly created by Ninja Theory. And we're given one of the most brutal and thought-provoking Norse Celtic stories in the medium. But what really stands out for me and for many others is that incredible sound design of every inner voice. All the voices were created on a binaural audio, meaning that the voices are given a 3D audio space in a headset. The placement of every voice constantly lingers on the shoulders of the player, both judging and celebrating every puzzle and maneuver that they're able to pull off. And no matter what you do, it's our instincts to listen to these voices in her mind. I once spoke about schizophrenia in the All We Need to Escape video, which I'll leave a link down below and at the end of this video if you want to check it out. But Hellblade perfectly provokes that same fear I have of mental illness that possibly runs in the family. And having an experience like this and seeing and knowing people who deal with psychosis, it makes me feel awful. It makes me feel such terrible compassion. Of course there are people out there in the world who live with it and can handle it, but seeing someone like Senua who's constantly thrown up against her own thoughts and the voices within her mind, it just makes me wonder what she's going through. And it's all those voices of self-doubt that I have within myself and my ability of a creative person, or even just the choices that I make in my mind. It always makes me second guess and makes me feel like those voices are just lingering in the back of my mind, judging me, waiting for that perfect time to pounce. There isn't a day where I'm not second guessing what I'm doing on a video or what I'm even doing right now. But I know that I must push on, having all these dreadful thoughts and doubts lurking in the back of my mind daily, pulling on the strings of my depression. It's so overwhelming and I wish it would just stop. As I said, horror is a broad term. Stories, both fact and fiction, can speak to our deepest emotions and embed themselves between the discs of our spines and lie in wait for those next horrors to seep under our skin. Well, that's got to be fun to edit, all those voices. I hope that turns out pretty well, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I wanted to take a little dive and just a little bit more of a personal touch on what I have with video games, and especially horror games. The games that sort of linger on my mind and seep their way under my skin, like I've said continuously throughout this video. Is there games that you can't play because you're too scared, or is there ever a game that's not even just a horror game that just connects with you and does something to you emotionally? And if so, I would love to know, and please put a comment down below. And if not, that's totally fine. Please feel free to leave a like, subscribe for more videos like this, and of course I'll see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.